From the 1950s through the early 2000s, Chrysler quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, unleashed a stream of vehicles that defied logic, convention, and often good taste. Some were odd-looking production cars. Others were bizarre concepts that never made it past the auto show floor. But all shared one thing: they were unapologetically weird. In this hour-long episode, we're counting down 33 of the weirdest cars Chrysler ever made. Vehicles that didn't just break the mold, they threw it out entirely. Number 33, 2004 Chrysler Crossfire SRT6. The Chrysler Crossfire SRT6 might just be one of the strangest attempts Chrysler ever made at blending European engineering with American muscle aesthetics and failing to satisfy either camp completely. Born during the uneasy years of the Daimler-Chrysler marriage, this sports coupe was essentially a rebodied Mercedes-Benz SLK 320 with all its guts intact, down to the chassis, suspension, and drivetrain. That meant under its skin was a German, but on the outside, it looked like something that tried a little too hard to be edgy and sophisticated. And nowhere was that more apparent than in the car's rear. The so-called boat tail fastback design that gave the Crossfire a rear end like a duck's backside. Some loved it for its boldness, but most people just scratched their heads. The SRT6 version, in particular, took the weirdness up a notch. Chrysler dropped in a supercharged 3.2-liter V6 sourced from AMG, good for 330 horsepower, on paper, enough to make the SRT6 a genuine performance threat. But the real-world driving experience never quite matched the numbers. Its 5-speed automatic transmission and relatively tame chassis setup left enthusiasts underwhelmed. Add to that a cramped interior with some of the most awkward blind spots in recent memory, and the Crossfire felt more like a midlife crisis impulse buy than a proper grand tour. But what really earns it a spot on this list is how Chrysler positioned it. They hyped the Crossfire as a design icon and spiritual successor to classic American coupes, when in reality, it was more of a marketing experiment, an identity crisis on wheels. It was never clear who this car was really for. The Mercedes faithful scoffed at its badge, and American buyers didn't understand why a Chrysler coupe cost so much and felt so German. Though it eventually became a cult classic in some corners, the Crossfire SRT6 remains a curious anomaly, half Chrysler, half Mercedes, and entirely weird. Number 32, 2001 Chrysler PT Cruiser. When the Chrysler PT Cruiser debuted in the early 2000s, it was immediately polarizing, and not just for its name. Officially classified as a compact wagon, the PT Cruiser defied easy categorization. It combined retro aesthetics, bulbous fenders, and a tall roofline in a way that was either charmingly nostalgic or cartoonishly absurd, depending on who you asked. Chrysler claimed it drew inspiration from 1930s sedans, especially the classic gangster-era look, but to many eyes, it looked like a Hot Wheels car brought to life by someone who lost the original blueprint. Despite its divisive appearance, the PT Cruiser was a surprise hit, at least initially. In its early years, Chrysler could barely keep up with demand. It sold over 1 million units globally before its run ended in 2010, proving that weird could be wildly successful if marketed right. Yet beneath the surface, the car was oddly basic. Built on the same platform as the Dodge Neon, it shared much of its mechanical DNA with that economy compact, but wrapped it in a radically different suit. Part of the PT Cruiser's weirdness wasn't just in the styling, it was in the lifestyle branding. Chrysler released dozens of special editions, from the Dream Cruiser to the Route 66 edition, even partnering with DC Comics to create a Superman-themed version. There were flame decals, faux wood paneling, and even a turbocharged GT model that pushed over 200 horsepower, trying to make it a hot rod for the suburbs. Today, the PT Cruiser is often mocked as one of the ugliest cars of its era, but its uniqueness is undeniable. It was bold, brash, and unapologetically weird. A retro-futuristic wagon that didn't care what anyone thought. And for a while, that made it a cultural icon, even if it now serves more often as punchline than blueprint. Number 31. 1955 Dodge LaFemme. The Dodge LaFemme stands as one of the most head-scratching attempts at gender-targeted marketing in American automotive history. Introduced in 1955, during an era obsessed with post-war consumerism and rigid gender roles, the LaFemme was Dodge's answer to a question no woman had actually asked. What if a car was made just for ladies? 5. Rather than innovate with size, performance, or practicality, Dodge simply took its full-size custom Royal Lancer and gave it a pink and white paint job. That was just the beginning of its feminine transformation. The interior came decked out in pink rosebud patterned fabric and white vinyl, continuing the cosmetic makeover from outside in. But the most bizarre feature wasn't visual, it was the accessories. Every LaFemme came with a matching pink purse, coin pouch, compact mirror, lipstick holder, cigarette case, rain cape, umbrella, and even a pink hat box, all tucked into a compartment behind the passenger seat. Chrysler genuinely believed that by offering color-coordinated fashion accessories, they would open up a new market of lady drivers. Needless to say, the idea flopped. Only around 1,500 units were sold in its first year, with slightly more in 1956 when the package returned, this time with gold trim and a shade of orchid instead of pink. But sales never took off, and Dodge quietly canceled the LaFemme option after just 2 years. The problem wasn't just the gender pandering, it was that the execution assumed women would be swayed by color schemes and vanity cases rather than practicality or performance. Today, the Dodge LaFemme is remembered as a relic of automotive marketing gone awry, a rolling stereotype on white wall tires. It may have been well-intentioned, but it now reads more like a parody of mid-century advertising than a serious attempt at innovation. In trying so hard to appeal to women, Dodge ended up alienating them and created one of the weirdest showroom curiosities ever to roll off a Chrysler assembly line. Number 30. 1978 Dodge Gene Machine D100. In the late 1970s, fashion met function in one of the strangest ways imaginable on the side of a Dodge pickup truck. The Dodge Gene Machine D100, released in 1978, was a limited edition version of the standard D100 pickup, but with a blue-collar twist so literal it bordered on absurd. This wasn't just a marketing name. The truck was decked out in denim-themed everything, from its denim blue exterior paint with white accent striping that mimicked jean stitching, to its interior, which featured denim-like fabric and even copper rivets. If that wasn't enough, the seats weren't just upholstered in blue fabric, they were designed to resemble the back pockets of a pair of jeans. The dash and door panels carried the motif as well, and the trim badges proudly read Gene Machine in a cursive Western font. There was no performance upgrade, no unique drivetrain, no workhorse capability that distinguished it from the standard D100, only a fashion statement on wheels. And a loud one at that. The idea seemed born from a mashup of disco-era trends and denim's rising pop culture cachet. Levi's had made denim seats cool in AMC's Gremlin X, so Dodge doubled down by turning the entire truck into a wearable. But the concept never quite caught on. Only a very limited number of Jean machines were ever produced, and today they are among the rarest and most obscure special edition trucks in Mopar history. Looking back, the Gene Machine is both a hilarious relic and a weirdly charming oddball. It wasn't trying to be fast or luxurious, it just wanted to be fashionable. In an era full of strange ideas, Dodge's denim-drenched pickup earns its place as one of the most bizarre production oddities the company ever committed to sheet metal. Number 29. 1989 Chrysler TC by Maserati. The Chrysler TC by Maserati is one of the weirdest automotive collaborations of the 20th century, not because it was ambitious, but because it was so confusing in its execution. Born from a partnership between Chrysler and Italian automaker Maserati during the reign of Lee Iacocca, this two-door convertible was supposed to blend American reliability with Italian style and craftsmanship. Instead, it landed somewhere between badge-engineered redundancy and overpriced confusion. At first glance, the TC looked eerily similar to the Chrysler LeBaron, which was available at the same time for far less money. Though the body panels were slightly different and the TC had a shorter wheelbase, most consumers couldn't tell them apart, which is a problem when your car costs nearly twice as much. Under the hood, things got weirder. While most TCs came with a Chrysler-built turbocharged 4-cylinder or a Mitsubishi-sourced V6, a small number were equipped with a rare Maserati-built 16-valve engine mated to a Getrag manual transmission. This exotic variant made the car unique, but also extremely difficult and expensive to maintain. Inside, the TC did try to offer a more refined experience. It featured hand-stitched leather, real wood trim, and a removable hardtop with opera windows. Yet even these luxuries couldn't justify the price tag when the LeBaron offered nearly the same driving experience for thousands less. Customers stayed away in droves, and production ended by 1991, just 2 years after it began. The TC by Maserati is a case study in how not to execute a transatlantic partnership. Too expensive, too redundant, and far too confusing for the market, it lives on as one of Chrysler's most ill-fated and bizarre ventures, an elegant shell wrapped around an identity crisis. Number 28. 1978 Dodge Lille Red Express. The Dodge Lille Red Express wasn't just a weird truck, it was a defiant outlaw on wheels. Introduced in 1978, it took full advantage of a little-known emissions loophole that allowed light-duty trucks to bypass the stricter catalytic converter regulations plaguing performance cars of the time. The result was a wild machine that ended up being one of the fastest American vehicles you could buy that year. Yes, faster than a Corvette. What made the Lille Red Express truly bizarre wasn't just the powertrain, it was the unapologetically loud design. Painted in a searing bright red with gold Lille Red Express truck decals on the doors, it came factory equipped with a pair of vertical chrome exhaust stacks mounted just behind the cab, giving it a look borrowed straight from a big rig. Add to that its wooden bed trim and fat white letter tires, and you had a pickup that looked like it belonged in a country music video more than a dealership showroom. Under the hood was a high-output 360 cubic inch V8 lifted from the Police Interceptor parts bin, breathing through a 4-barrel carb and a cold air induction system. It made 225 horsepower, serious muscle for the late 70s, and launched the truck from 0 to 60 in under 7 seconds. That was unheard of for a pickup at the time. But what makes the Lille Red Express worthy of this list is that it was both brilliant and bonkers. It was Dodge flexing its rebellious spirit, sneaking muscle into a vehicle category nobody expected. A muscle truck with semi-truck styling and drag strip performance, the Lille Red Express was pure Mopar madness and remains one of the most gleefully bizarre production vehicles Chrysler ever greenlit. Number 27. 1967 Imperial Mobile Director. In an era obsessed with excess, the Imperial Mobile Director may have been Chrysler's most bizarre attempt to turn an automobile into a boardroom on wheels. Offered as a rare option on the 1967 Imperial Crown Coupe, the Mobile Director package was marketed to executives who couldn't afford to waste time, even while commuting. It was an automobile designed for the man who wanted to conduct business between traffic lights. The main attraction was the passenger side front seat, which could swivel 180 degrees to face the rear passengers, transforming the front cabin into a lounge-style office setup. A small but elegant fold-out wooden table could be extended from the center armrest, complete with built-in storage for paperwork and writing materials. It wasn't just a gimmick. The mobile director truly turned the car into a mobile meeting room, complete with optional reading lamp and even a typewriter mount. The idea was deeply rooted in the Mad Men culture of the time, where executives measured success not only by the power of their title, but also by how many leather-bound surfaces they could surround themselves with. Chrysler hoped this rolling luxury suite would appeal to ambitious businessmen on the go, but the idea never really caught on. Fewer than a few dozen were ever produced, making the Mobile Director one of the rarest and most obscure factory options Chrysler ever offered. Looking back, the Mobile Director feels like a product from a parallel universe, one where meetings happen between stoplights and car interiors rivaled office suites. It was a bold, deeply weird attempt to fuse business and pleasure into a single machine. And while it failed in the marketplace, it succeeded at being one of the strangest and most wonderfully over-engineered concepts Chrysler ever brought to life. Number 26. 1989 Dodge Dakota Convertible. The Dodge Dakota Convertible stands as a shining example of Chrysler asking, "Why not?" when no one was really asking the question to begin with. Released in 1989, the Dakota Convertible was exactly what it sounds like, a mid-size pickup truck with a soft top. It wasn't a custom one-off or an aftermarket job. This was a factory-backed convertible truck, sold through dealerships and backed by warranty. Built in partnership with American Sunroof Corporation, the Dakota Convertible retained its standard two-door configuration but swapped the roof for a manually operated soft top and a fixed roll bar behind the seats. The result was a pickup that offered wind-in-your-hair freedom while still being able to haul mulch, an incredibly odd blend of open-air fun and work truck utility. It came in two-wheel drive only, offered either a four-cylinder or a V6, and could be optioned with power windows and a cassette player for the full late 80s experience. Despite its novelty, the Dakota Convertible was a sales flop. Fewer than 3,000 units were built over its two-year production run, with most sold in its debut year of 1989. The concept just didn't resonate with the truck-buying public, who typically prioritize durability and practicality over beach cruising style. And convertible lovers weren't exactly flocking to pickup trucks. Yet in hindsight, the Dakota Convertible is weird in the best way. It was cheerful, impractical, and completely unexpected from a brand better known for muscle cars and minivans. In a sea of beige sedans and boxy work trucks, the idea of cruising with the top down in a pickup is so bizarre, it's almost brilliant. Today, it stands as a quirky relic of an automaker unafraid to go topless in the strangest segment imaginable. Number 25. 1970 Plymouth Superbird. The Plymouth Superbird is the kind of car that looks like it drove straight out of a comic book and into NASCAR history. Released in 1970 for one model year only, it was Plymouth's no-holds-barred attempt to dominate stock car racing by bending the rulebook until it snapped. Built off the Roadrunner platform, the Superbird added a radically extended aerodynamic nose cone and an outrageously tall rear wing that towered over the trunk like a vertical stabilizer on a jet. It wasn't just for looks. This bizarre bodywork gave the car serious downforce at high speed, making it a legitimate threat on superspeedways. Underneath its cartoonish body, the Superbird came equipped with muscle to match. Buyers could choose between a 440 cubic inch Super Commando V8, a 446 barrel setup, or the legendary 426 cubic inch Hemi. These engines gave the Superbird enough grunt to back up its extreme appearance on both the track and the street. But what really pushes the Superbird into the realm of Chrysler weirdness is what happened off the track. NASCAR required that a certain number of Superbirds be built for public sale. Over 1,900 were produced, but dealers had trouble moving them. The public just wasn't ready for a car that looked like it belonged on a runway instead of a driveway. Many sat unsold for months and were even converted back into standard roadrunners to make them more sellable. Decades later, the Superbird is revered as a collector's treasure, but at the time, it was the automotive equivalent of wearing a cape to a board meeting. Unapologetically outrageous and entirely functional in its absurdity, the Superbird remains one of the most gloriously weird production cars Chrysler ever dared to build. Number 24. 1987 Chrysler Portofino. The Chrysler Portofino was one of those rare concept cars that looked like it had been designed for a sci-fi movie set in a beachside utopia. Unveiled in 1987, it was based on the Lamborghini Jalpa platform, thanks to Chrysler's brief ownership stake in Lamborghini during the late 1980s. But unlike the aggressive Italian wedge cars of the time, the Portofino went for a sleek, rounded look, almost jelly bean-like, yet unmistakably radical. The car's most bizarre and memorable feature? It had 4 scissor doors. Yes, you read that right. While most cars, even exotic ones, barely dared to use 2 upward-opening doors, the Portofino had 4 that opened like butterfly wings. The front and rear sets lifted vertically and met in the middle with no B-pillar between them, creating an entirely open and pillarless side profile. It was a showcase of engineering boldness and design lunacy in perfect harmony. Inside, the Portofino was equally dramatic. The futuristic dash swept around the driver like a cockpit, and the cabin was trimmed in pearlescent tones and digital displays. It was designed to be as much a rolling art piece as a vehicle, and in that sense, it succeeded completely. But production was never even remotely on the table. Chrysler never intended to mass-produce the Portofino, but it played a surprisingly significant role in shaping the brand's design language for the early 1990s. The cab-forward silhouette, short overhangs, and long windshield rake would later appear in models like the Chrysler Concorde and Dodge Intrepid. Still, as a concept, the Portofino remains one of the weirdest and most beautiful fantasies Chrysler ever put on wheels. It was surreal, unnecessary, and totally unforgettable. Number 23. 2003 Dodge Kahuna. The Dodge Kahuna was a concept car that tried to answer a question nobody had really asked. What if a minivan tried to be a surfer's ultimate dream machine? Revealed in 2003 at the Detroit Auto Show, the Kahuna was Dodge's attempt to blend SoCal beach culture with family hauling practicality. The result was a surf wagon so bizarre, it looked like it had rolled straight out of a cartoon. Visually, the Kahuna stood out immediately thanks to its boxy stance and aggressive body cladding. It wore fake wood paneling in certain sections, a nod to the classic woody wagons of the 1940s and 50s, but with a modern, almost industrial twist. Massive wheels, a wide stance, and low-profile tires gave it a hot rod edge, while a huge canvas sunroof stretched from windshield to rear liftgate. But the true weirdness was found in its side windows, fully retractable glass panels that disappeared completely into the doors, offering open-air freedom like a convertible. Inside, the Kahuna continued its surfer fantasy. It was configured to seat 6 passengers with a 3-row layout and featured fold-flat seats that could be rearranged or removed entirely. The cargo area was designed with enough room for surfboards, skateboards, and any other beach gear one could imagine. Dodge even added neoprene-like seat covers to protect against wet bathing suits and sand. Though it was powered by a standard turbocharged engine borrowed from Chrysler's front-wheel drive stable, no one really cared about performance specs. The Kahuna was about attitude and lifestyle, just not one minivan buyers identified with. It was fun, over-the-top, and extremely specific. In the end, it remained a concept only, but its sheer commitment to weird surfer cool earns it a rightful place among Chrysler's oddest creations. Number 22. 1999 Plymouth Howler. The Plymouth Howler was a concept that screamed rebellion, literally and figuratively, against everything that had held its predecessor, the Prowler, back. Unveiled in 1999, the Howler was essentially a prowler with muscles, grit, and practicality bolted on. It was Chrysler's answer to all the critics who loved the Prowler's looks but hated its lack of performance and utility. On the surface, the Howler retained the retro-modern hot rod styling that made the Prowler an instant attention magnet. Open front wheels, a long nose, and a chopped rear deck gave it a sleek, aggressive stance. But this time, designers took things a step further. They converted it into a two-seat pickup, adding a small cargo bed with a hard tonneau cover and tailgate, finally giving it some usable trunk space. The joke that the Prowler couldn't even fit a golf bag no longer applied. Under the hood, the Howler made its boldest move. Instead of the underwhelming V6 found in the production Prowler, Chrysler stuffed a 5.9-liter V8 under the hood. Paired with a 5-speed manual transmission, it promised real performance to match its hot rod looks. This was no longer just a cruiser, it was a statement piece with teeth. Inside, the cabin featured sculpted leather seats, aluminum accents, and a minimalist design aimed at emphasizing the driver's experience. But despite the buzz and positive reception, the Howler never made it to production. Plymouth was already on its deathbed by the early 2000s, and Chrysler wasn't ready to revive the concept under a new badge. Still, the Howler stands as a what-could-have-been masterpiece. It fixed nearly every complaint about the Prowler, added bizarre but functional touches, and delivered a truly weird and wonderful evolution of one of Chrysler's boldest designs. Number 21. 1995 Plymouth Backpack. The Plymouth Backpack was one of those concept cars that left people scratching their heads, part science fair project, part compact pickup, and entirely strange. Unveiled in 1995, the Backpack was Chrysler's vision for what young, active urban drivers might want in a vehicle for the 21st century. Built on the humble Dodge Neon platform, it took the bones of an economy car and fused them with the utility of a micro-sized pickup truck. From the outside, the Backpack looked like a toy for adults. Its short wheelbase, tight proportions, and narrow body gave it a cartoonishly small footprint. But what really stood out was the rear. The cargo bed wasn't just small, it was detachable. Chrysler envisioned owners swapping out the cargo module for other attachments, like bike racks, coolers, or camping gear, turning it into a Swiss Army knife on wheels. The company even hinted at potential modular tech upgrades that could dock in the back, though these never left the design stage. Inside, the Backpack featured seating for 4, but barely. The rear seats were more symbolic than functional, squeezed in to qualify the car as a 4-seater. The cabin was utilitarian, with exposed metal elements, waterproof materials, and a general outdoorsy vibe that tried to sell you on adventure. It came with a simple dashboard and minimal luxuries, consistent with its low-cost ethos. Although it never made it to production, the Backpack showcased a level of playful weirdness that few automakers dared to explore. It was too small to be a real truck, and too strange to appeal to mass-market consumers. Yet in its bizarre fusion of function and fun, it captured the experimental spirit of mid-90s Chrysler in a way no one expected. Number 20. 1968 Dodge Charger III. The Dodge Charger III wasn't just a concept car, it was a rolling sculpture of pure space-age fantasy. Unveiled in 1968, this low-slung, wedge-shaped creation looked less like a muscle car and more like something Captain Kirk might use to commute to the Starship Enterprise. Designed as a futuristic showpiece, it had almost nothing in common with the production Charger of the same era, aside from the name. The Charger 3's profile was astonishingly low, standing barely over 3 feet tall at the roofline. With a sharply pointed front end, exaggerated rear fenders, and a full canopy instead of conventional doors, the car had the aerodynamic styling of a fighter jet. The cockpit canopy tilted up and forward to allow driver and passenger access, while the steering wheel and instrument panel lifted out of the way like something out of a sci-fi control room. To enter, you practically had to recline into the seat as if boarding a spacecraft. Underneath the skin, there wasn't much going on mechanically. The Charger 3 was a non-running model, built only as a design study, but Dodge claimed it was built around a rear-mounted engine platform with racing suspension geometry. None of that was ever realized. Of course, the car was more about imagination than engineering. What made the Charger 3 so weird wasn't just its looks, but how radically disconnected it was from Dodge's muscle car lineup at the time. In a year when the Charger RT was selling high-powered V8s to thrill-seekers, Dodge was also envisioning a surrealistic show car that no one could actually drive. That kind of disconnect defines peak concept car weirdness. The Charger 3 never made production, but it left a deep impression as one of the most bizarre and daring pieces of automotive design Dodge ever attempted. Number 19. 1956 Chrysler Norseman. The Chrysler Norseman may be the most mysterious car Chrysler ever created, not because it was secretive, but because no one ever got to see it. Designed in collaboration with the famed Italian coach builder Ghia and crafted in 1956, the Norseman was a sleek, advanced concept car built to showcase futuristic engineering and cutting-edge design. But its destiny was tragically sealed, not on the road, but at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. The Norseman's most radical feature was its cantilevered roof, a fully functional design with no visible A-pillars. Instead, a single support beam ran through the rear, allowing the windshield to flow uninterrupted across the front of the car. Chrysler engineers claimed the roof could withstand 4 times the car's weight, a feat unheard of at the time. The glass area was immense, and the overall shape was aerodynamic and smooth, with subtle tail fins and hidden headlights giving it an ultra-modern presence. Inside, the Norseman featured a 4-seat layout with futuristic controls and luxury appointments far beyond what American cars offered in the mid-50s. It was never meant for production. It was a pure design exercise, a show car built to turn heads and inspire the next generation of Chrysler vehicles. Sadly, the Norseman never made it to any auto show. It was being shipped from Italy aboard the SS Andrea Doria when the ocean liner famously collided with another ship and sank off the coast of Nantucket in July of 1956. The Norseman went down with the ship and has never been recovered. Today, it remains one of the greatest what-ifs in automotive history. A car with bold innovation, sleek beauty, and tragic fate, the Norseman's absence makes it even more mythic and unquestionably one of Chrysler's weirdest and most haunting creations. Number 18. 1995 Chrysler Atlantic. The Chrysler Atlantic was a concept car that looked like it had time-traveled straight from the 1930s into the future, dressed in gleaming curves and pre-war elegance. Unveiled in 1995, the Atlantic was Chrysler's tribute to the Art Deco era of motoring, drawing heavy inspiration from the legendary Bugatti Type 57 SC Atlantic. But instead of being built by a boutique French automaker, this rolling sculpture came from an American brand, best known for minivans and economy cars at the time. The body was a feast of exaggerated proportions, long hood, short deck, and swooping fenders that wrapped around massive wheels. It was painted in a soft metallic champagne color, and its symmetrical twin hood spines ran down the center like a raised vertebrae, evoking old-world coach-building craftsmanship. The car even had freestanding headlights and a grille that seemed plucked from a luxury liner, not a showroom. Beneath the hood was an engine as strange as the car itself, a straight-8 power plant, which was actually two Dodge Neon 4-cylinder engines bolted together. This Frankenstein engine made around 300 horsepower, not outrageous, but adequate for the concept's purposes. The Atlantic was never meant to be a performance car, it was a design manifesto. Inside, the Atlantic featured rich leather, jewel-like gauges, and brushed metal accents, perfectly echoing the exterior's deco flair. The cabin was narrow and intimate, tailored more for atmosphere than practicality. Chrysler never seriously considered putting the Atlantic into production, though some executives reportedly pushed for a limited run. In the end, the Atlantic was a beautiful, bizarre contradiction, part romantic fantasy, part mechanical curiosity. It remains one of Chrysler's most elegant and weird creations, a car too perfect for the real world, but unforgettable in the annals of concept car history. Number 17. 2004 Chrysler ME412. The Chrysler ME412 was the kind of car that made jaws drop, not just because it looked like a spaceship on wheels, but because it came from a company best known for family sedans and minivans. Unveiled in 2004, the ME412 was a hypercar concept that blindsided the automotive world. This wasn't just fast by Chrysler standards, it was world-beating fast, boasting numbers that rivaled Ferrari, Lamborghini, and even Bugatti. The name ME412 wasn't a marketing gimmick, it literally described the car's powertrain. ME stood for mid-engine, while 412 referred to the car's 12 cylinders fed by 4 turbochargers. At its heart was a Mercedes-sourced 6-liter V12 engine, force-fed enough air to crank out a jaw-dropping 850 horsepower. Chrysler claimed a top speed of 248 miles per hour and a 0 to 60 time of just 2.9 seconds. For context, that was quicker than almost anything on the planet at the time. But performance wasn't the only thing that made the ME412 weird. It was the fact that Chrysler, of all brands, built it. Wrapped in a full carbon fiber body with wild aerodynamics and butterfly doors, the car looked more like something out of a European boutique shop than a Detroit design studio. It had a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission, a full aluminum chassis, and race-level cooling systems, details usually reserved for hyper-exotics. Despite serious buzz and a working prototype that was track-tested, the ME412 never made it to production. Some say internal politics under the Daimler-Chrysler umbrella killed it, since it threatened to upstage Mercedes-Benz's own Halo cars. Whatever the reason, Chrysler shelved one of its most audacious projects. Today, the ME412 remains a bizarre unicorn, proof that even America's most practical automaker once dreamed of outrunning the Italians. Number 16. 1997 Dodge Sidewinder. The Dodge Sidewinder was a concept truck that defied every expectation of what a pickup should be. Unveiled in 1997, this bizarre vehicle was less light-duty workhorse and more muscle-bound street weapon with a cargo bed. It was Dodge at its most unhinged, blending Viper-grade horsepower with a futuristic design that looked equal parts speedboat, hot rod, and sci-fi fever dream. At the core of the Sidewinder was its outrageous powertrain. Dodge ripped a massive 8.0-liter V10 straight out of the Dodge Viper and dropped it into this so-called truck. That engine produced 640 horsepower and 630 pound-feet of torque, numbers that would humble most supercars of the era. And while the Sidewinder was never a functioning production vehicle, Chrysler claimed it could rocket from 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds. But what really made the Sidewinder weird was the way it looked. It rode low to the ground, wore 22-inch wheels, and had a body that curved and swooped like a high-speed water slide. The doors were cut deep into the body for easy access, and the open cabin featured bold, industrial styling with metal accents and exposed framework. It didn't resemble any pickup on sale then or now. there was zero practicality in the Sidewinder. The bed was short, the ride height was useless for hauling, and off-road capability was non-existent. But none of that mattered. The Sidewinder wasn't built for ranches or job sites. It was a fantasy machine, a what-if, exercise in absurd power and radical design. It remains one of the strangest concept trucks ever dreamed up, a Viper in pickup clothing that no one asked for, but everyone still remembers. Number 15. 1997 Plymouth Prowler. The Plymouth Prowler was a production car that looked like it had escaped from a custom hot rod show and accidentally ended up in a dealership showroom. Released in 1997, the Prowler was one of the most visually radical cars ever sold by a major automaker. With its open front wheels, sloping nose, and chopped rear deck, it looked like something a tattooed fabricator might weld together in a garage, not something you'd expect to find next to a Dodge Caravan. Designed as a rolling tribute to 1930s hot rods, the Prowler came with plenty of attitude and little compromise in the looks department. It featured exposed aluminum suspension components, cycle-style fenders, and a sharply tapered body that hugged the pavement. The cabin was snug, minimalist, and driver-focused, with retro-inspired gauges and plenty of brushed metal accents. From a styling perspective, it was a triumph of weirdness and a celebration of Chrysler's willingness to take risks. But under the hood, things got a bit confusing. Instead of the rumbling V8 one might expect from a car that looked like a dragster, the Prowler was powered by a 3.5-liter V6 making 250 horsepower. It was paired exclusively with a 4-speed automatic transmission, disappointing enthusiasts who wanted the full hot rod experience. While the car was quick enough, it never lived up to its muscle-bound image. Still, the Prowler was never about numbers, it was about presence. It turned heads like few cars could, and Chrysler leaned into the weirdness with bold colors like purple, orange, and bright yellow. Though production ended in 2002, the Prowler remains one of the boldest and strangest moves in Chrysler's history. It was a mass-produced hot rod that prioritized style over substance, and in doing so, earned a cult following as a modern oddball icon. Number 14. 1993 Chrysler Patriot. The Chrysler Patriot was less a car and more a high-tech experiment dressed in carbon fiber. Revealed in 1993, it was Chrysler's futuristic vision of a Le Mans-worthy race car that didn't rely on conventional powertrains. The Patriot pushed the boundaries of what a performance vehicle could be, blending hybrid electric propulsion with experimental aerospace-level materials and energy systems. Its powertrain was one of the strangest combinations ever attempted. At the heart of the Patriot was a gas turbine engine, not to drive the wheels, but to generate electricity. That electricity was stored in a high-speed flywheel, spinning it up to 140,000 revolutions per minute, which then powered an electric motor connected to the wheels. This meant that the car technically had no mechanical connection between the turbine and the wheels, an unheard-of design at the time. Wrapped in a slippery, jet-inspired carbon fiber body, the Patriot looked every bit the futuristic speed machine it aimed to be. Its extreme low profile, covered wheels, and massive intakes made it appear ready to attack the Mulsanne Strait at any moment. But it never got that chance. The Patriot's biggest flaw wasn't the idea, it was the flywheel. Engineers struggled to build a flywheel system that could safely contain such high rotational forces, and the danger of a catastrophic failure at racing speeds proved too great to ignore. The project was eventually shelved, but not before Chrysler proved it was willing to dream wildly beyond the limits of combustion engines and conventional engineering. The Patriot remains one of the strangest, most ambitious concept racers never to see a track. It was a bold hybrid before hybrids were cool, and one of Chrysler's most bizarre stabs at reinventing speed itself. Number 13. 2003 Jeep Treo. The Jeep Trio was a concept that seemed less like a car and more like a prop from a futuristic animated series. Unveiled in 2003, it was Chrysler's stab at capturing the hearts of young, urban drivers who supposedly wanted something compact, adventurous, and wildly unconventional. In reality, it was one of the most peculiar ideas Jeep had ever produced. The Trio was tiny, smaller than most compact cars of its time, and featured a three-seat layout that immediately set it apart. Two front seats were arranged side by side, while a single centrally positioned rear seat was wedged into the back. This 2+1 configuration, as Jeep called it, was meant to offer flexibility in a small footprint, though it made for a cramped and awkward cabin experience. The styling was bold and bubble-like, with translucent roof panels, massive glass surfaces, and an overall jelly bean profile that looked more sci-fi than SUV. Despite being a Jeep, the Trio didn't have four-wheel drive or even a gas engine. It was envisioned as a hydrogen fuel cell or battery electric vehicle, with in-wheel electric motors providing propulsion. This made it not just weird by Jeep standards, but revolutionary in theory, if never in practice. Perhaps the oddest feature was the integrated bicycle rack on the back, complete with space for two full-size mountain bikes. Chrysler imagined urban adventurers driving to the edge of the city and pedaling the rest of the way. It was a niche idea for a niche lifestyle that may never have existed in the first place. The Trio never made it beyond the auto show circuit, but its compact weirdness and genre-blending identity have cemented it as one of the most unusual concept vehicles ever to wear the Jeep badge. Number 11. 2001 Dodge Super 8 Hemi. The Dodge Super 8 Hemi was a concept car that looked like it had crash-landed from a retro-futuristic alternate universe where jukeboxes ran on gasoline and chrome was mandatory. Unveiled in 2001, this bold and bizarre concept was part-time machine, part design experiment, and all attitude. It was a love letter to 1950s Americana filtered through a 21st century lens, and the result was nothing short of outrageous. From the outside, the Super 8 Hemi looked like a mutated blend of a classic Dodge Coronet and a space-age pod. It featured a massive vertical grille, huge round headlights, and an unusually upright windshield that gave it a commanding, almost cartoonish road presence. Riding on 22-inch wheels, it had a cab-forward design that pushed the passenger compartment far forward, enhancing both interior room and the vehicle's odd proportions. The interior was equally eccentric. It featured diner-inspired design cues with metallic accents, bench-style seating, and even green-tinted windows that made the cabin glow like a neon sign at midnight. Instead of a traditional instrument cluster, the Super 8 had a unique floating gauge pod and a retro-styled steering wheel with push-button gear selectors. The vibe was unmistakably nostalgic, but the technology was rooted in Chrysler's modern ambitions. Under the hood, the Super 8 housed a 5.7-liter Hemi V8, producing 353 horsepower, marking the rebirth of the legendary Hemi name in Chrysler's lineup. Although this specific car never reached production, the design language and mechanical foundation paved the way for future hits like the Chrysler 300C and Dodge Charger. In hindsight, the Super 8 Hemi was loud, strange, and unapologetically weird. It didn't care about sleek minimalism or European subtlety. It was pure American excess, wrapped in retro chrome and injected with horsepower. It remains one of Dodge's wildest styling experiments and an unforgettable icon of concept car weirdness. Number 10. 1984 Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor. The Dodge M4S, better known to movie fans as the Turbo Interceptor, was a prototype that blurred the lines between science, fiction, fantasy, and real-world engineering. Built in 1984 through a collaboration between Dodge and PPG Industries, the car was originally designed as a pace car for racing events. But thanks to its unforgettable appearance in the cult film The Wraith, the M4S took on a mythic status far beyond its limited real-world function. Visually, the M4S was from another dimension. Its aerodynamic body was crafted from hand-laid carbon fiber and fiberglass, finished in a black pearl paint that shimmered like oil under sunlight. The low-slung shape, flush-mounted windows, and hidden headlights gave it the look of a jet fighter designed for street racing. It didn't just look fast, it was fast. Underneath the rear deck sat a 2.2-liter four-cylinder engine, heavily turbocharged and intercooled to produce around 400 horsepower. That might not sound impressive today, but in 1984, it was mind-blowing for a car this light. The M4S was reportedly capable of reaching 194 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest American experimental cars ever built at the time. Despite its performance and design brilliance, the M4S never reached production. It was too radical, too expensive, and too exotic for Dodge's mainstream customers. Only a few prototypes were built, and most people came to know it only through its role as the ghostly car of vengeance in The Wraith. Today, the M4S remains a legendary one-off, a strange fusion of corporate engineering and Hollywood dream-making. It's one of the rare concept cars to earn a second life as a pop culture icon, and one of Dodge's most fascinatingly weird creations. Number 9. 1967 Dodge Diora. The Dodge Diora wasn't just a car, it was a design rebellion. Unveiled in 1967, the Diora was a custom-built concept based on a Dodge A100 pickup truck, but almost every trace of its commercial roots had been surgically removed and replaced with pure imagination. Created by famed custom car builders Mike and Larry Alexander, the Diora made its debut on the show circuit and instantly became a sensation, not just for what it was, but for how utterly weird it looked and functioned. At first glance, the Diora didn't resemble a truck at all. Its cab-forward design, low-slung stance, and teardrop profile gave it the appearance of a lunar rover or a vehicle designed to patrol the runways of a futuristic airport. But the strangest part of the Diora wasn't its styling, it was the way you got inside. The vehicle had no conventional doors. Instead, you entered through the front of the car by lifting the windshield up like a canopy and then swinging the lower front panel outward like a door. This entry method was borrowed from a 1960 Ford station wagon tailgate and was unlike anything else on the road. Inside, the cabin featured a minimalist dash and surf-inspired seating. It wasn't built for practicality, it was designed to show what could happen when form completely overtook function. The Diora quickly gained fame, even winning awards at the 1967 Detroit Autorama, and went on to become one of the original 16 Hot Wheels cars when Mattel launched the toy line in 1968. While it never entered production, the Diora left a deep imprint on automotive design culture. It was playful, inventive, and gloriously strange, proof that Dodge wasn't afraid to throw out the rulebook in the pursuit of weird beauty. Number 8. 1997 Dodge T-Rex. The Dodge T-Rex was a six-wheeled monstrosity that looked like it had escaped from a military base or an off-road fever dream. Introduced in 1997 as a concept truck, the T-Rex was Chrysler's bold experiment in pushing pickup truck design far beyond the edge of convention. While most truck makers were focused on towing capacity and payload, Dodge decided to add an entire extra axle and turn the Ram into something that resembled a tank for the suburbs. Based on the Dodge Ram 2500 platform, the T-Rex featured 6 wheels, 3 axles, with full-time 4-wheel drive and a fully functional 6x6 drivetrain. The rear tandem axles shared suspension duties and distributed power for enhanced off-road traction. Power came from an 8.0-liter Magnum V10 engine, producing over 300 horsepower, the same powerhouse found in the heavy-duty Viper-powered Rams of the era. The goal wasn't speed though, it was dominance. Visually, the T-Rex looked like a pickup truck on steroids. It featured bulging fenders, an extended bed to accommodate the extra axle, and rugged styling cues that made it look like it could crawl over anything, and maybe even pull a mountain while doing it. Despite its outlandish looks, the T-Rex was a fully functional prototype, not just a rolling display piece. Although Dodge never put the T-Rex into production, its influence can still be felt today in the rise of ultra-capable 6x6 conversions offered by aftermarket tuners and boutique shops. In retrospect, the T-Rex was wildly ahead of its time, a bizarre, oversized beast that previewed the super truck craze long before it became mainstream. It was loud, unnecessary, completely impractical, and exactly the kind of glorious weirdness that makes concept cars so unforgettable. Number 7. 2005 Chrysler Aquino. The Chrysler Aquino was a concept car that didn't just think outside the box, it redesigned the box entirely. Revealed in 2005 at the Tokyo Motor Show, the Aquino was Chrysler's attempt to imagine what a compact urban car could be if it were created by an artist rather than an engineer. Named after its lead designer, Akino Tsuchiya, the car blended Japanese aesthetics with American flair, resulting in a rolling sculpture that defied classification. From the outside, the Aquino looked like a pastel-colored egg on wheels. Its asymmetrical doors were among its strangest features. There was only one on the driver's side, but two on the passenger side, including a sliding rear door. This was meant to improve access to the cabin from the curb, especially in tight city parking situations. The roof was domed, the windows exaggerated, and the overall silhouette was both bubbly and futuristic, like a character from a Pixar movie brought to life. Inside, the Aquino pushed weirdness to new heights. The cabin featured a lounge-like atmosphere with a wraparound sofa in the rear and wooden flooring that looked more like a designer's loft than a car interior. Ambient lighting, soft curves, and organic shapes made it feel cozy yet surreal. The driver's seat was isolated up front like a captain's chair, reinforcing the idea that the Aquino was meant to be both personal and communal. There was no groundbreaking powertrain or performance ambition. The Aquino existed to spark imagination, not excitement on the road. Though it never made it to production, the Aquino remains one of Chrysler's most whimsical and creatively weird experiments, a true departure from corporate conformity and a bold embrace of playful design. Number 6. 1960 Plymouth XNR. The Plymouth XNR was a concept car so radical, so asymmetrical, and so defiantly nonconformist that it looked like it had driven straight out of a pulp sci-fi comic. Built in 1960 and named after its designer, Virgil Exner, the XNR was intended to showcase the creative potential of Plymouth design, and it absolutely delivered on weirdness. Every angle of this car seemed to bend the rules of symmetry and conventional automotive aesthetics. The most striking feature of the XNR was its lopsided layout. The driver's seat sat under a tall, sculpted fairing that rose behind it like a dorsal fin, extending into the trunk in an unbroken line. The passenger seat, by contrast, sat lower and was uncovered, almost secondary in importance. On the hood, a raised power bulge and an offset intake scoop continued the unbalanced visual theme. From above, the XNR looked like a two-seat fighter plane that had decided to turn itself into a roadster. Underneath the drama was a surprisingly modest power plant, a slant 6 engine tuned to around 250 horsepower. Though not blisteringly fast, it was quick enough for its day and certainly gave the XNR some legitimate performance cred. Inside, the cockpit was minimalist but refined, with clean gauges and aircraft-inspired touches that reinforced its jet-age identity. Only one XNR was ever built, and after its show circuit run, it was quietly shipped to the Middle East and hidden away for decades. When it resurfaced in restored condition many years later, it reignited interest in one of Plymouth's strangest and most artistic statements. The XNR wasn't just a concept car, it was a rolling sculpture of mid-century bravado and one of the most gloriously weird vehicles Chrysler ever dreamed into reality. Number 5. 1961 Chrysler Turbo Flight. The Chrysler Turbo Flight was the kind of car that didn't just suggest the future, it screamed it at full volume. Revealed in 1961, the Turbo Flight was Chrysler's dramatic farewell to the Exner era of design, and it embodied everything glorious and strange about jet-age automotive fantasies. Its wedge-like body, turbine powertrain, and futuristic features made it one of the most forward-thinking and weirdest concepts Chrysler ever put on wheels. At first glance, the Turbo Flight looked like a land-bound aircraft. It had a pointed nose, glass canopy roof, and sweeping tail fins that jutted out like stabilizers on a rocket. The entire canopy lifted up and back to allow access to the cabin, eliminating the need for conventional doors altogether. This bubble-top design gave it an unmistakably sci-fi silhouette and offered panoramic views from the cockpit-style interior. The centerpiece of the Turbo Flight was its turbine engine. Chrysler was deep into its experimental turbine phase during the early 1960s, and the Turbo Flight was a testbed for its latest ideas. Though the turbine was not fully functional in this particular model, the car was intended to explore how turbine-powered vehicles could be cooled, controlled, and styled for the future. Adding to the weirdness was a rear-mounted air brake that automatically deployed during deceleration. Yes, an air brake on a concept car. The interior was filled with cutting-edge materials, sculpted seats, and controls that felt lifted from a jet fighter. It wasn't just a car, it was a fantasy capsule for atomic-age dreamers. Though it never made production, the Chrysler Turbo Flight remains a milestone in automotive eccentricity. Bold, bizarre, and unmistakably futuristic, it's a gleaming reminder of a time when car design had no limits and weirdness was celebrated. Number 4. 2005 Jeep Hurricane. The Jeep Hurricane was not just a concept, it was an off-road superweapon. Unveiled in 2005, the Hurricane took Jeep's rugged DNA and dialed every dial to maximum insanity. This wasn't merely a four-wheel drive machine, it was an 800-plus horsepower, four-wheel steering, twin-engine monster that could perform feats no other Jeep had ever attempted. At its heart, or rather, hearts, were two 5.7-liter Hemi V8 engines, one powering the front wheels and the other the rear. Together, they produced a combined 670 horsepower and over 700 pound-feet of torque. The Hurricane could operate on one engine or both, depending on the conditions and power needs. A bizarre dual propulsion system more commonly found in aircraft than off-roaders. But raw power wasn't the weirdest part. The Hurricane featured a revolutionary four-wheel steering system where the front and rear wheels could turn in opposite directions for tight turns or in the same direction for lateral movement. This gave the Jeep the ability to perform a zero-radius turn, spinning completely in place like a tank, a trick that boggled the minds of spectators. Visually, the Hurricane was a stripped-down beast. There were no doors, no roof, and no windshield, just a carbon fiber shell, massive tires, and exposed mechanicals. The vehicle looked more like a dune buggy designed for Mars than anything you'd take on a trail in Utah. Though the Hurricane was never intended for production, it served as a rolling flex of engineering power. It proved that Jeep could still go wild when it wanted to, embracing weirdness not just for design's sake, but for capability. To this day, it remains one of the most outrageous and technically bizarre vehicles ever built under the Jeep banner. Number 3. 2003 Dodge Tomahawk. The Dodge Tomahawk wasn't just weird, it was almost unbelievable. Unveiled in 2003 at the North American International Auto Show, the Tomahawk looked like the unholy union of a motorcycle, a supercar, and a piece of modern art. With 4 wheels, a 10-cylinder engine, and a claimed top speed north of 300 miles per hour, it was a concept so outrageous it bordered on satire. At its heart was an 8.3-liter Viper V10 engine, producing 500 horsepower. This was the same engine used in the Dodge Viper sports car, now wedged between the rider's legs in what resembled a massive rolling sculpture. Rather than the traditional 2-wheel layout of a motorcycle, the Tomahawk used 2 pairs of wheels, 2 up front and 2 at the rear, mounted closely together. These were designed to lean independently, giving the vehicle a unique combination of stability and agility. Despite the aggressive motorcycle form factor, the Tomahawk was never street legal. It lacked mirrors, turn signals, emissions equipment, and any semblance of rider protection. Dodge didn't even call it a motorcycle officially, instead labeling it a rolling sculpture. Yet they built several of them, reportedly selling a handful to collectors for over $500,000 each. The Tomahawk wasn't about practicality or even performance testing. It was a brand flex, a rolling exclamation point on Dodge's bravado and engineering madness. No one needed a 10-cylinder motorcycle, and certainly no one could ride it to the grocery store. But that wasn't the point. The Dodge Tomahawk remains one of the most bizarre, theatrical, and straight-up bonkers machines ever created, not just by Chrysler, but in all of automotive history. Number 2. 1989 Plymouth Voyager 3rd. The Plymouth Voyager 3rd is so weird, it made the list twice, and for good reason. Unveiled in 1989 as a conceptual rethink of what a family vehicle could be, the Voyager 3rd took modular design to an extreme that even today feels more like a sci-fi plot device than a realistic transportation idea. It was essentially 2 vehicles in one, a small 3-passenger front module that functioned like a compact commuter car, and a detachable rear module that transformed it into a full-sized 8-passenger minivan. The idea was that you could drive the front pod alone for daily errands or city commuting, then attach the rear module when you needed space for the whole family, luggage, or extra cargo. The rear module didn't just add seats, it had its own wheels and drivetrain, and when docked, the 2 vehicles would communicate electronically and operate as a single unit. Once combined, the Voyager 3rd became a 6-wheeled, dual-engine mega minivan unlike anything ever seen before or since. It even came with a high-tech interior that featured then futuristic touches like configurable seating, a digital instrument panel, and dramatic forward visibility thanks to its sloped windshield and expansive glass canopy. On paper, it was the ultimate in flexibility and customization. But practicality was the Achilles heel. Few people wanted to own a 2-part vehicle, let alone store a giant rear pod in the garage just in case. Add to that the complexity of dual engines, redundant controls, and docking mechanisms, and you had a concept that was way ahead of its time, or maybe just ahead of common sense. The Voyager 3rd remains a standout example of automotive ambition gone wonderfully weird. Number 1. 1963 Chrysler turbine car. Topping the list as the weirdest car Chrysler ever made is none other than the legendary Chrysler turbine car, a vehicle so futuristic, so outlandishly ambitious, and so fundamentally different from anything else on the road that it remains unmatched in automotive history. Developed in the early 1960s and released for public testing in 1963, this sleek, bronze-colored coupe wasn't just an experiment in style, it was a revolution under the hood. At its core was a gas turbine engine, derived from aerospace technology and unlike anything found in a traditional car. The turbine spun at speeds up to 60,000 revolutions per minute, operated with only 60 moving parts, and required virtually no maintenance. No spark plugs. no radiators, no oil changes. And most astonishing of all, it could run on almost any combustible liquid, including kerosene, diesel, perfume, vegetable oil, and even tequila. Chrysler built 55 of these radical machines and loaned 50 of them to ordinary American families for real-world testing. Imagine pulling into your driveway in a jet-powered coupe that sounded like a turbine engine spool up at takeoff. The cars were shockingly smooth to drive, with minimal vibration and otherworldly acceleration, though they did suffer from poor fuel economy and throttle lag. Despite overwhelming public fascination, the project never advanced to mass production. Complex federal regulations, lack of infrastructure, and production costs made the turbine engine commercially unfeasible. By the mid-1960s, Chrysler ordered most of the turbine cars destroyed, leaving only 9 survivors scattered in museums and private collections. The Chrysler turbine car wasn't just weird, it was prophetic. A symbol of unfiltered engineering imagination, it dared to redefine how we think about power, fuel, and motion. To this day, it remains the most bizarre and brilliant vehicle Chrysler ever created.